offensive coordinator Phil Longo is out. Luke Fickell making this move shortly after the disappointing loss to Oregon. And all season long, though, the offensive results have not been quite what anyone imagined for the Dairy Raid. Danny, what's the path? Because I think isn't that the conversation? The conversation is like, okay, this didn't work. How do you try to put together your next offense if you are Luke Fickell?
I'm surprised, and I think it was a bad fit from the get-go for a couple of different reasons. One, I think Drake May made that system look really good. I mean, that's a top 3, NFL draft pick who probably plays well in a lot of systems. Incredibly talented quarterback. But I also think sometimes they're just bad fits. And I remember at Big Ten Media Days talking to Luke Fickell and asking about Phil Longo's system and being like, hey, are you guys going to air it out this year? Now you got Tyler Van Dyke after they had tried Tanner Morgan the year before, or Mordecai, right?
Yeah, Mordecai.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he was like, well, we're not necessarily going to pass it around a lot. And I'm like, well, that's kind of what this guy's done everywhere he's been. So you could tell, I felt, that there's a little bit of a push and pull with that relationship of what Luke Fickell wanted them to be and Longo wanting them to be a little bit, more explosive, a little bit more aerial. There's some programs where I think you just have to fit what you've always been, and why try to be something you're not? Like with the caliber of athletes that you're going to recruit at Wisconsin, don't you think it's better to try to be a more physical team?
I think it depends on your goal. Like if you think you're a team that can actually win the Big Ten, then you probably need to be able to play a style that is going to allow you to win the Big Ten, like what Oregon and Ohio State can play and recruit to. But I don't think that's realistic anytime soon for what Luke Fickell has going on at Wisconsin. The good thing for Luke Fickell at Wisconsin is like Washington, USC, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota, like none of them really seem like they're likely to jump up and take that 4 spot in the Big Ten next year. Like maybe USC, if they get some of the transfer stuff right, would be, perhaps the closest. But your goal right now is just to keep your job, and like you need to be making bowl games with relative ease. And so I think, like, Fickell should probably be applauded for thinking that Wisconsin had a lot of potential, and maybe it still does, just maybe not under him, or maybe it's going to take longer. But he went outside of his comfort zone, I think, when he hired Phil Longo. And I would expect him to probably go to someone like really familiar if he can here. More running the ball, more defense, because like it's self-preservation at this point. Like you're in survival mode. I don't think you're building towards like a team that can win the Big Ten. You got to like try to not get fired. It's been a bad tenure so far. So I agree with you. I think they will probably go to more like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa type offense.
I think Wisconsin can try to win the Big Ten. Indiana is going to be in the college football playoff. Indiana. I think it's just as capable of doing it at Wisconsin. In fact, I think it's far more likely that Wisconsin would be able to do it than Indiana. So it's interesting because last week, Matt Rule, in his second year at Nebraska, things not going as well as planned, fires his offensive coordinator. This week, Luke Fickell, in his second season at Wisconsin, things not going as well as planned, fires his offensive coordinator. So this is certainly a situation where it's like, well, clearly it's not working. We got to do something because, as Bud mentioned, I'm trying to stay here. But this is also not that surprising. It's just like if you've been like the stuff you've been hearing out of Madison all season. It's like I felt like they were butting heads all year, even coming into the season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I said this when Luke Fickell first took the job. I was skeptical if this was going to work, not because of the style of play and what they need to do to compete in the Big Ten, because Oregon and Ohio State can do whatever the hell they want. They have a bunch of 5-star players. Like that's really what it is. If you have those players, it doesn't matter what style you play. But for Wisconsin, having grown up and watched this conference my entire life and knowing the kind of talent that's available, Wisconsin is not exactly a hotbed of air raid kind of players. Like you see the linemen that come out of Wisconsin, they're not the quick, nimble spread option kind of guys. They're all 6'3", 315 pounds. They're just little refrigerators. And it's like, there's a certain style of play that they can work with. So for Wisconsin to do what it's been trying to do, they kind of had to get away from their recruiting footprint and recruit outside of Wisconsin, which is not as hard to do anymore in the NIL transfer portal era. but it's hard to really kind of build the foundation of your program doing that when you're not recruiting the guys from your own area. So I'm not shocked that this change is coming. I'm not shocked that it hasn't really worked. I do agree that they will probably have to go more towards their old style. But even if you look at like the teams that are having success now, the development programs in the league, we mentioned Indiana. They're not playing a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of offense. Illinois is not playing a 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of offense. You can still get more spread-based kind of RPO principle stuff that the air raid was supposed to be and be successful. It's just Wisconsin's biggest problem to me hasn't been the style of play as much as it's been their lines of scrimmage. They're just not that good. Like, they've been overwhelmed by teams, and I think that is the biggest problem, and I think that's what Luke Fickell is looking at and saying that's what we need to change.
It's a good
I
point.
agree with that.
Yeah,
I think this move's been known, like Tom said, for months.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is
To
going to
your
be longer
point
than last year.
You know, Indiana's just a good team. They're very balanced. They're not one-sided. Like, I mean, it's not that you don't have to be a genius. I think sometimes you get a little bit too cute. People think, oh, I've got to run the air raid. I've got to throw it all over. I have to run the ball every time. Watching Barry Lunny, what he's done at Illinois with Altmaier, you see him moving him around a lot, getting him short, easy throws, and then you take your shots when they're there. You get good quarterback play. It helps a ton. Same thing with
Good
Indiana.
receivers at Illinois. That's
Yeah,
the other
Right.
problem.
And Indiana does too.
Yeah.
I was just going to blame it. Surratt's pretty good weapon on the outside. That's the thing too. Like, they do need to attack that and get their quarterback some help.
They have also had some misfortune, which is probably not their fault, with some of the recent transfers, and we should cut them a break on this, okay? So you take the receiver from BC, Griffin, I think the kid's name is, hasn't been able to play all year for some kind of eligibility, whatever it is. And then you take Van Dyke, and he gets hurt like almost immediately. I mean, that's not saying he was going to play great, but Wisconsin's probably not sweating the bowl game thing if Van Dyke stays healthy, or if they have a better complement of receivers, or if, like we talked about this preseason, what's a position they cannot afford an injury? Interior defensive line, and they lost their best player on the defense in week. Was it the Western Michigan game I think he got hurt in? Like, it was early on. I was like, oh,
it was either that or the South Dakota, or whoever they started the season with, South Dakota, I think. I can't remember.
I mean, I know we talked about it on the group chat and on the show. Like, okay, that if you're thin there and you lose your guy who's legit like Big Ten level stud, you're going to be in trouble. So I do think a bounce back is possible for them, because just stay a little healthier at key positions and results.
I mean, their schedule too. We talked about that as well in the beginning of the season. I mean, if they win the last two, aren't they over their win total, or was it 7.5? It's either 6.5 or 7.5. So it's kind of right about what we expected. And I remember saying, oh, they might be better than what their record says they are, which I don't think we're saying that. But like, the season has unfolded kind of the way we thought it was going to go.
I don't think this is performance based.
Right.
I mostly agree. I mean, we sat there on the Big Ten desk, and I think all four of us just like, they're going to have to be a whole lot better than they were last year to have the same record that they had last year. Because last year their schedule was a cakewalk. This year, I mean, Indiana plays the bottom 6 teams in the Big Ten. Like, Indiana kind of has the schedule Wisconsin had last year.
Mm-hmm. And then somebody in the tailgate was asking why I didn't provide enough warning from my own experience. And Danny, just to back up and sort of bring this full circle in terms of the personnel. Yes, I do think that both Drake May and Sam Howell made it look good, but you know who else did? Josh Downs.
Javonte Williams.
All of these truly NFL caliber skill position players. De'Ami Brown a couple years ago was part of the 2020 team that was so good and explosive with Michael Carter, Javonte Williams. So yeah, if Wisconsin had a couple NFL wide receivers, maybe the offense does end up looking a little bit different.
Jimmy's and Joe's.
Yeah, it's crazy.